Springvale is a suburb in the southeast of Melbourne, capital city of Victoria. Residing at Holly Cottage, a neat double-fronted villa in Buckingham Avenue in 1924, the year that electric lights were first installed in Springvale, was the Mouat family. Robina Mouat was a war widow. Her husband, Herbert Alexander, had died from complications after being shot in the spine during the Great War, dying at hospital in the UK on the 28th of September 1918 at the age of 30. Herbert Mouat had married Robina Kerr in 1911. They had 4 children. Their eldest son, Ivan Victor Mouat, originally known as Ivan Victor Kerr, had been born in 1910 before the couple wed. It is not certain if Herbert was his natural father. Thereafter followed Joyce Florence in 1913, Archibald Thomas in 1915, and the youngest, Herbert Verdun, in 1916. On August the 23rd, 1924, a Saturday afternoon, 2 of the brothers, Ivan, 14, and Archie, 9, left home at about 1 o'clock to go gather gum leaves at the Springvale Cemetery, a short distance from their home. Archie had made a little cradle for his sister earlier that day. She wanted to press the leaves in a book. At 3 o'clock, Ivan returned home alone, passing his mother who was gardening without saying a word. He spent the next 2 hours making a boot box and reading. At about 5, having not seen her other son come home, his mother asked Ivan where Archie was. Ivan replied that he was back at the Dandenong Road Bridge, talking to a man in a car when he last saw him. Ivan said when they reached the spot where the railway crossed the road, Archie had complained of feeling tired and didn't wish to proceed, choosing to wait by the side of the road for his brother to continue to the cemetery, gather the leaves, and return. Near where the boys were on the side of the road, a motorist pulled up under the bridge and began tinkering with the engine of a small grey 2-seater automobile. The man appeared sober when he said hello to the pair, although there was a liquor bottle on one of the car seats. Ivan continued to the cemetery, glancing back to see that a man, who he described as stoutish, was chatting with the young boy. When Ivan returned, no more than 5 or 10 minutes later, Archie, the man, and his car had all gone. Ivan said he heard the car leaving while he was away, and that it seemed to be heading toward Melbourne. Ivan went with the man to search for Archie in the area of the bridge. When they returned, it was without Archie. Robina Mouat, feeling a sense of dread, quickly alerted police that her son may have been kidnapped. Police organised a search party of some 200 people, including Aboriginal trackers, in an attempt to find the boy. The search was fruitless, although the trackers found footsteps believed to be Archie's in the area where Ivan said he last saw his brother. The mother stayed out until 1:30 a.m, vainly searching for her child. She said Archie had never run away from home before. Ivan said his brother had only once remarked that he wanted to leave home, to go and be a cowboy in America. Another 100 people from Springvale volunteered on the Sunday to search for Archie, again finding no sign of the boy. His paternal grandmother, Mrs. Ashman, recalled that a man had been around the neighbourhood 2 months earlier, collecting threepences from boys, telling them it was a fee to become Boy Scouts, and then scarpering with the money. She said ominously, "I wouldn't be surprised if he knows where Archie is." Archie's clothes were found neatly folded near a pumping station on the side of the creek on Sunday evening. Late on Monday afternoon, Archie himself was finally located. It was his own mother Robina, accompanied by her sister Vida Kerr and son Ivan, who found his lifeless body floating naked in a weir behind the Sandown Park racecourse. There were heavy rains that started on Monday and local flooding at the time. The creek, which on Saturday had been only a few inches deep, was now a raging torrent. Police were hindered in that any footprints would have been washed out. They did find marks of a man's boots on the bank of the creek, but no child's prints in association with them. Due to the flow of the creek, it was thought possible Archie had drowned and his body been damaged by bumping on sharp rocks. When the body was recovered and examined by a doctor, it was obvious, however, that Archie Mouat had been murdered, and it was feared that a maniac killing children was abroad. At first it was thought that Archie had been strangled, but it was later revealed he had suffocated. Mud he had inhaled deeply into his lungs, showing that the boy's head had been held down in the creek until he died. After death he had been shockingly mutilated, a knife used to cut a curved gash low on the boy's groin. It was estimated that the body had been in the water for at least 24 hours. Sunday evening was considered a likely time of death. Another child, Irene Tuckerman, had been killed at Caulfield on the 2nd of August the same year, and many began to believe that the same killer was responsible for both crimes. Mrs. Mouat was quoted as saying that there were so many scoundrels about that children were unsafe. They ought to lynch the wretches, she said. She did not believe Archie would have gone swimming, and that he had been lured away by the man in the car and murdered. The excitable Mrs. Ashman revealed that she had had a vision on the Sunday night of the murderer, a villain wearing a light grey cap, bending over the boy, killing him. An eminent but unnamed doctor provided his opinion that it was the work of a maniac, probably middle-aged, and more likely to be a foreigner than an Australian, as according to him it was continental Europeans rather than Anglo-Saxons who produced such types who were perverts and a menace to all around them. There were numerous men camped in the area, and a local eccentric who were all interrogated carefully, but no suspicions attached to any of them. The Commissioner of Police declared that it was a perplexing case, and made an appeal for the motorist to come forward and give police a statement. Even while the newspapers were reporting the case and carrying the warning that the killer could strike again, police made an arrest following a confession on Wednesday night. Police alleged that Ivan Mouat admitted that it was he who had murdered his own brother. On Wednesday, police had spoken to a friend of Archie's named Graham Francis. He had been at the Mouat home on the Saturday morning between 9:30 and 12:30, playing with Archie and Ivan. As he was leaving, Ivan said they'd go to the racecourse that afternoon. Graham replied, "No, go to the creek." Archie quickly agreed, saying yes to the suggestion. The trio agreed to meet up at Springvale station at 2 p.m. However, Graham's mother did not allow her son to keep the rendezvous that afternoon. There had been a motorist who had said, "Good day, lads," as the boys passed him, but that was all that happened. Archie said they would get better leaves at the racecourse, so they went there. While they wandered around the racecourse, Archie said he was going to climb a windmill. Ivan told him not to. "Do not go up there. If you do, it will be your last time on earth." Archie made an attempt to climb the structure, but eventually desisted. After they walked around the racecourse some more, Archie said he was going to bathe in Mile Creek, also called Springvale Bridge Creek. He undressed near the pump house, which provided water to the racecourse, and walked along the creek for about 200 yards in the direction of the weir. Ivan kept pace on the creek bank, having decided it was too cold to enter the water. Archie stood on a stump in the creek where the water was 2 feet deep. He fell in, and when he did, Ivan suddenly hit his brother on the head with a stick while he was still under water. Then he struck him again as he rose from the water, and then Ivan watched for 5 to 10 minutes as Archie drowned. After Archie was dead, he dragged the body up on the bank and mutilated it with a table knife, which they had taken to cut the gum leaves with. He then put the body back into the creek. When asked why he had killed his brother, Ivan replied that he did not know. Something just came over him. He had no grudge against his brother. The only reason he could give was that he had been to the pictures on the Friday night, and somebody had stuck a pin in him while he was seated, and that he had suffered great pain and had not known what he was doing. Ivan was remanded in the Children's Court, to be held in the reformatory at Royal Park for a week on the 29th of August. While he was there, Archie's funeral took place at the Springvale Cemetery. Rubina Mouat went from the funeral to meet with Ivan at the children's home. A solicitor speaking on behalf of the family indicated that she doubted the veracity of the statements alleged to have been made by Ivan. Mrs. Ashman went further and said that Rubina believed Ivan had witnessed his brother's murder and been threatened with death himself by the killer not to divulge the truth. She said Ivan had been in a nervous state ever since the death, and that the detectives had turned his mind. She said Ivan was unlike other members of his family, in that he was reserved and quiet. In the children's home, Ivan, who was tall and fair, was said to be well behaved and obedient, at times joining in sports with the other boys, and at times quiet and thoughtful. A Dr. Jabbour visited Ivan to obtain an independent statement, and Ivan repeated the same story of how he murdered Archie to him. Dr. Jabbour came away with the impression that Ivan Mouat may have had a mental impairment. The inquest into the death of Archie Mouat took place in the city morgue at the end of September. A different version of events was now offered by Ivan's Aunt Vida. She told the coroner that when she had visited Ivan at the children's home, he told her the original story he had related, but that he and Archie had passed the motorist they spoke to, and both had kept walking. In this version of the story there was another man, described as dark, with a dark moustache, wearing a grey felt hat, blue coat and black boots, and carrying a brand bag, who had been sitting on the bridge. This second man began to follow the boys, who collected some gum leaves near the creek. Archie undressed and went to play in the creek while Ivan sat on the bank. The man sidled up to Ivan and said, "Smell the new scent I've invented." Ivan saw the man put a black handkerchief up to his face, and he lost consciousness, reviving a short while later, feeling as if water had been splashed on his face. The man told him to go home, which Ivan did. Asked if he had seen Archie on recovering, he said he did not. Responding to questions, Vida Kerr said that Ivan was bigger than Archie, but not much stronger than his younger brother. He was, she said, a truthful boy, who had never been known to harm anything. Ivan had been with her when Archie's body was discovered, and she said his demeanour had not changed. Dr. Mollison gave evidence that Archie's ear, nose and hair were crammed with gritty mud, which had also been found in his windpipe and bronchial tubes. It was this mud, the pathologist said, which had caused death by suffocation. There were small abrasions around the face and lips. Speaking of the mutilation of the lower abdomen, he reported that one wound measured 4 inches. Rubina, Vida and Mrs. Ashman all attended the inquest dressed in mourning black. During the lunch break they sat with Ivan, who chatted and ate chocolate. The coroner found that Archie had died of suffocation, and that Ivan had been responsible. Ivan Mouat was committed for trial on the 15th of October. When asked if he wished to make a statement, he declined on advice from his lawyer. Then he smiled at his mother and the detective who was seated beside him as he resumed his seat. The trial never happened. In October, Ivan Mouat was certified insane and removed to Mont Park Asylum. 3 doctors had examined Ivan while he was held at the children's home, and on the basis of their report, which was withheld from the public, he was detained. Whenever attendants at the asylum asked him if he had killed his brother, he never denied nor affirmed it, saying instead, "If you say I did it, I did." Early in 1925, Smith's Weekly had a reporter visit Ivan under the guise of being a friend of his music teacher. He found Ivan to be a bright-eyed, delicate-looking lad whose pale complexion was rather feminine. Ivan was in charge of the asylum's library of 1,100 books. He read a lot, Zane Grey being his favourite author. Ivan had studied piano prior to the tragedy and had reached an almost professional standard of playing. Being unable to play in the asylum was the thing he missed most. He received some schooling from a fellow inmate named Frank O'Brien, a teacher who had been judged insane after murdering his wife with a hammer at Mildura, and then, when liberated on parole, went and set his schoolhouse on fire. Asked about the murder, if he had any memory of that day, he looked away and did not reply. "Did you go right into the cemetery to get gum leaves?" he was asked. He answered, "No, we went as far as the cemetery paddock." He said they got quite a few gum leaves. Asked about his memories of that day, he said he could not remember. The interviewer asked about his confession. Ivan said he was frightened, and the police kept asking him the same questions until he said yes. Did you mean it? No. When asked why he didn't tell his mother about the interrogation, he simply shrugged his shoulders. The Smiths Weekly reporter believed that Ivan was completely sane. Apparently, so did authorities, but as no Christian institution was willing to take him, he remained at Mont Park. Ivan was working in the asylum as a tailor in 1927. Rabina Mary Mouat was buried with Archie when she passed away in 1983 at the age of 92, the burial taking place one day after the 59th anniversary of Archie's death. Ivan Mouat died in Melbourne in the mid-1990s. Did Ivan Mouat actually murder his brother? The facts as presented do not add up. Archie had inhaled mud as if his face rested against the creek bottom, not simply floated on top of the water. And it was explicitly said there was no wound such as being struck twice by a stick hard enough to cause unconsciousness on his head. Was Ivan framed by the police? Certainly the government pathologist who examined Archie, Dr. Mollison, went on record when Ivan was first charged to say that his story was impossible based on the facts. There was no wound or bruising on the head, although he conceded that a mark on Archie's neck could have been caused by a blow strong enough to stun him. Mr. Young, the blacksmith who retrieved the body from the creek, also stated publicly that there was no head wound suffered by Archie. Dr. Mollison was a very experienced medical examiner, having been involved with the investigation into Frederick Deeming and the unsolved murder of Bernard Bauer, and who later worked on the Pyjama Girl case. On the other hand, why did Ivan return home and say nothing about his brother disappearing with a strange man for 2 hours, and only then because his mother asked him where Archie was? And why did he tell his Aunt Vida a variant story that a man had chloroformed him? Was he shielding someone else, or had he suffered a temporary bout of madness, as was theorised in the newspapers? Maybe Archie really did overbalance when standing on a tree stump and fell into the water. It could have been shallow enough that Ivan may have thought his brother was messing around, but deep enough to drown the boy. By the time Ivan realised something was wrong, Archie could have died. Could that be the guilt he was hiding? After the police verbaled him with their implausible story, he may have decided that he was morally culpable for his brother's death, and just went along with it. Even then, that doesn't fully explain the mutilation of Archie's groin. Could the body have been gashed on rocks or tree roots in such a way that the pathologist mistook it for a clean, deliberate cut? Perhaps the answer lies in the week leading up to the tragedy. Ivan was good at music and working with wood, but did not excel at school, and had made it clear he found being there frustrating. His mother had taken him to 3 builders to try and get a job for him, but none of them had any work on offer. A position was then found at a cement factory. Ivan worked there from Monday to Friday, when he was let go, as he was not physically strong enough for the work. The following day, Archie died. Could resentment and disappointment have transferred itself to his brother in one moment of madness? We will never know for certain what happened at the creek that afternoon. The answer lies concealed forever in the dark corners of history.